I would like to start by saying that this segment will likely be the last segment we will deal with respect to the major scale. So we're coming to the end of our major world experience and our exploration of the major world. And right after this, we're going to explore the other/dark side in the minor world. But before we get there, there is really one subject that I think we need to cover, which is extremely important and also extremely powerful. And it is called the Circle of Fifths. Some people know it as the Circle of Fourths. It's both. And what the Circle of Fifths/Fourths is, and from now on I'll just call it the Circle of Fifths, is a method or a system for understanding what happens with the C major scale when you leave C major. And to date, what we've been doing has almost entirely been centered around these notes. And we should know that extremely well at this point. One of the things that you know about the C major scale is that it's the all-white key. Every single one of these is a white key. We're not using any of these. So the question has to be asked, how do we get into these keys? Where do they show up? And the answer is through the Circle of Fifths. Now, the Circle of Fifths is, again, a system for going through what we call keys. And a key means, more than anything else, a root note or a fundamental note. And in this case, the key of C major, the scale starts with C major, or at least with the note C. And it becomes major when you have from here, whole step, half step. And you can see half, whole, and then another half. Now, leaving the key of C, one of the things that happens is that we keep the relationship whole, half, whole, half. That's our Rosetta Stone, if you will. That's our DNA of any major scale. And what happens through the Circle of Fifths is that we establish new keys by going up in fifths. And so if we start with C, we'll end up where? Did you figure it out? You should know it by heart, but at this point, the fifth of C, here's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth scale degree, is this note, which you know, of course, is, right, G. So G is the next key in the Circle of Fifths. Note that G is a fifth above C. Now, to extend this out, you would figure out from G would be D, and so that would be the third scale in the Circle of Fifths. If this is the first stop in the Circle of Fifths, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And they make a pattern, and obviously the pattern is built on fifths. But one of the interesting things about the Circle of Fifths is that when you start from C and go up a fifth to G, and G is now the key. That's our new home. That's our new fundamental. And so now from G, what we do is we build the whole, half, whole, half scale. And watch what happens when we start with G. So there's G. We go whole, half, whole, half. And that last set of steps is really important. So remember, from here, whole, half, whole, but now here you still have to go half step, whole step. That's a major second, or a whole step apart. And so what ends up happening in the key of G is that we naturally introduce our first black key. In this case, it's a sharp, which is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now, you might recall that this has two names. This is both F sharp, which is from F up a half step, but it's also G flat, from here down a half step. And there are rules as to when you'll call it an F sharp and when you'll call it a G flat. One of the rules of the Circle of Fifths is if you start in C and go up in fifths, all of the keys are sharp keys, which means you have a C. Here in G, you have an F sharp. Here in D, you'll end up with a C sharp. And then after D, you have A, you'll have a G sharp. And then E, you'll have a D sharp. Now watch how this works. From here, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now, just to be clear, before we go on to any of the other keys, let's just explore the key of G major. Since we have an F sharp here in the 7th scale degree, we have to look at our triads because our triads are now completely different. Even though they're all major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, the notes change. So we start with G major, A minor. Now here's where it gets tricky. That's B minor. Notice how you used to do BDF. Just do leapfrog, right? From the key of C, you'll do leapfrog for triads. Well, you can't really do that anymore. So now we're in the key of G. You can still do leapfrog, but you just have to remember that this note doesn't exist in our key. This note exists in our key because anything in G major must have an F sharp, not an F. And so, G major, A minor, still leapfrogging. You'd normally go to B, diminished, but since this note isn't correct, you'll go to B minor here. Keeping going, the 4th triad is major, and then the 5th triad is major, and watch what happens here. Again, F sharp, not F. F sharp. And then our 7th chord, which we know is diminished, we go to F sharp. See how it's still diminished? That quality is the same as this quality. It's just played here. And then back to G major. So when dealing with the circle of fifths and going to other keys, you'll find that there are going to be sharps that show up. And again, these are specific for the keys that are upwards in C major. When you go down a fifth in C major, something else happens, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's show how that works. Let me start by just reminding us where we were. This clip here are the 4 chords that we left off with in the last sequence. These are the 4 chords from the homework from section 4. And as you can see, it's C major, first inversion, or at least, excuse me, second inversion, G, then C, then E, making C, E, G. Here, E minor, E, G, B. Here, A minor, A, C, E. And then here, G major, G, B, D. So we're using voice leading. These triads sound like this. So what we're going to do is take this clip and we are going to copy it downward. And now we're going to look at it here. Note that this clip is the exact same as this clip, except now what we're going to do is transpose these notes to the key of G. And the way we're going to do that is simply move them up a fifth, or more specifically, a perfect fifth. You might recall that a perfect fifth is 7 half steps, not 5 half steps. 7 half steps. So I'm just going to hit the up arrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can verify by noting that this note, the middle note, which was the root in C, is now the root in G. And so that is this guy. Here it is in C. Note that the middle is C. This guy is now G. And what I'm going to do for clarity is come down here, and I'm going to rename this clip with the mouse G major. And so I'll go back and forth between C major and G major. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'll record ready this and I'll play. I'm going to go ahead and pull up this keyboard so we're not confused. So now what you're going to do is watch those chords and my bass note. And I'm going to track the chords. It's going to be C, E, A, G. Same 4 chords, and I'm just going to lay in the bass with the left hand. 4, 3, 2. Now back to the root, this would be back to C. And, okay, so again, the progression is a 1 chord, a 3 chord, a 6 chord, and a 5 chord, also known as C major, E minor, A minor, G major. And so what we'll end up with when we move to G major is the exact same progression in terms of it being a 1, 3, 6, 5 chord. But now they're in the key of G, so the notes are no longer... Now what we have is that this is home, so we have a 1, 3, 6, 5. And it should sound like this. 4, 3, 2, back to G. Now, one of the things you'll note is that this progression and the other progression are exactly the same in terms of their relationship to each other. But in terms of the actual notes, they're radically different. Did you see the F sharp show up? It would have shown up from here in the B minor, and then again, it showed up after the E minor to the D major. And I think up here, it was there in that octave. So it's the exact same progression, but now we have different notes. And so, simply put, you can write everything you want in the key of C major and then simply transpose it to whatever key you want. That's a shortcut. That's great for getting started. Eventually, you'll want to be practicing all of your keys and all of your scales and all of your triad progressions in each key so that you're very comfortable with what notes belong in what key. But for the purposes of the exercise, or at least this training tutorial, I will continue onward.